Wake up, Chief. I need you.
We're here to talk about Halo 4, and you're watching Connected Digital World. I'm Frank O'Connor. I'm the Franchise Development Director at 343 Industries, and I kind of run the franchise all up, so everything from the overall fictional content of the game to stuff like this, to being a spokesperson, working with marketing. And it's a big franchise, so we have New York Times best-selling novels, action figures, the whole thing, so I sort of run that, at least from a creative standpoint. We have much cleverer business people doing the nuts and bolts of it.
Cool, so for those 7 people who've lived under a rock for this time and don't know what Halo is, do you want to tell us a very little bit about Halo 4?
Yeah, Halo 4, it's a direct sequel to, obviously, Halo 3, if you're good at counting. And it picks up where that story left off. Our Spartan superhero, the Master Chief, he had saved the galaxy, and had kind of sacrificed at least his location at the end of Halo 3, and was floating in orbit around a strange alien world in the wreckage of a starship and frozen in cryosleep. And that was the end of that trilogy, and so obviously begged lots of questions, and so when we started working on Halo 4, we decided the simplest thing to do is pick up where that left off, and so we get to find out what happens to the Master Chief, and we get to find out what's on that world that he's in orbit around.
So the game's set almost 5 years after,
Yeah.
which ironically is about 5 years since Halo 3.
Yes.
So what surprises are there, without giving anything away, obviously, in this game?
The game is, the first game was about sort of exploration and wonderment, and the sort of awe of finding yourself marooned on a mysterious world, getting the chance to explore it, and we wanted to kind of go back to that. That was one of the most evocative feelings that Halo gave people, and I think that we wanted to see if we could capture that again. And so we very deliberately make some nostalgic nods to the first level of Halo in our campaign. And you start out in a claustrophobic starship fighting Covenant, which was how you started the first game. But things open up after that. You crash land in this mysterious world, Requiem. And we wanted to, again, kind of reward the player for exploration and create a more open, wondrous environment. That's a fairly lofty word to use about your own stuff, but that's the purpose of it. Sci-fi, and we want to give people a chance to do things that you can't do in the real world. It's not just about empowering them as this action hero. It's also about letting them see things that they've never seen before, and experience things that they've never experienced before. And that's I think where games are genuinely magical, and that's I think where they're best.
So 343 is obviously a new studio taking the reins of Halo. Were you guys nervous at all about taking over such a huge, iconic IP?
Yeah, we were terrified. I think that Bungie had created such a strong universe and such an amazing set of really innovative game experiences, and so we knew we were going to have to somehow live up to that. We started with 9 people, and we expanded to about between 250 to 300, depending on how you count it by the time the game shipped. And it's an incredible legacy to have to live up to, let alone try and exceed, because it can't be good enough to just make a game that was as good as the last game you played. Anybody who's building a game has to try and do better and do more, and make that experience worthwhile for people. So it was scary, and it was a big challenge. And the honest truth is, we won't know if we've succeeded until the game comes out, until people have played it, until that community and that ecosystem is actually experiencing it and discussing that experience. So we don't know. Marketing can tell us how many units are being pre-ordered. We can, judge the sort of relative media success from, PR's accounts of column inches. But what we don't know is how it's going to feel holistically and experientially to the people who are making it for until it comes out.
I don't think you've got anything to worry about having played it.
Good, I'm glad.
I promise you that.
I've heard a lot of really good positive feedback, but it's still nerve-wracking, it's still terrifying.
So what challenges did you guys face creating Halo 4?
The usual sets of challenges. The biggest challenge, of course, was building a team from scratch, and we had to recruit and interview people from all over the world. And that actually ended up being one of the big opportunities, because we ended up with a lot of really new skills and great new perspectives. So that fed into the creation of the game. And there's other really big ticket items. Obviously, Spartan Ops is an incredibly complicated thing, and is still in progress. Actually, that's the one thing that isn't finished. All the gameplay is finished, but we're still making the episodic content as we speak. But it's on track and it's on schedule and it's testing well and people are enjoying it. So we're feeling better and better about that. But creating a new race of villains to fight is hard. It was necessary. We needed to shake up the sandbox a little bit. People love fighting the Covenant, so we knew we had to bring them back. And even just doing that and improving those guys and making those guys interesting to fight again would have been a big enough challenge. To add a completely new culture into the mix and all the sandbox elements and weapons and power-ups that they bring into the game was a tremendous design and balancing issue that we've been working on right up until the last few weeks. And we love the way that they feel and we love the way that they play. But again, it's not up to us. If we got to review our own games, we'd be all set. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about the music. It's very atmospheric, obviously. I mean, it's an amazing soundtrack. Having listened to it quite a few times now.
Yeah.
So how did you go about sort of getting that into the game?
We had a list of about, and you can't really call a list of 65 anything a short list, but we had a short list of 65 composers that we were interested in. Marty O'Donnell created the music for Halo and created this one of the most famous soundtracks of all time in video games. And we had a choice. We could either try and find someone who was like Marty and sounded like Marty, and I'm sure there's a million composers who could sound really good and sound like Marty, but we didn't want to have a pale imitation of something and never be able to reproduce the sort of genius that he brought to it. So we went in a different direction, and the composers that we looked at were people who we knew could bring something really original to it. And one of those guys was a guy called Neil Davidge, who worked with Massive Attack and has worked on the movie soundtracks and other score stuff. And we went through his agent, and his agent came back and said, Neil doesn't want to work on video games. He's made that quite clear to me in the past, that that's not work he's interested in. And so his agent went and reported that he'd had this conversation with us to Neil. And Neil's like, oh yeah, thanks. I don't work on video games. What one was it, by the way? And he's like, Halo. And he's like, oh, call him back. Because he turns out he's a Halo fan. He'd been playing it for years. So, and it was something he did want to do. And he was, I think, excited to work on something that he had a really innate understanding of. But of course, all our story was new, so it was really fun working with him and sort of having these very lofty discussions about what the Prometheans sounded like and what the Master Chief's heroism represented, and getting the pretentious music journalism conversation, which is like incredibly fun to have, but especially with someone who actually knows what they're talking about, which is Neil. And that's the soundtrack we ended up with, and we're really, really happy with the way it turned out.
And also there's Forward Unto Dawn.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It's a live-action digital series. It airs on October 5th, and it will run weekly until the launch of the game on November 6th. It's free to watch on YouTube's, anything that with a YouTube client through Machinima Prime, which is YouTube's biggest channel. And that's kind of the point. We wanted to expose the Halo universe to as broad an audience as possible. And we're doing it in a pretty unique way. It's set 20 years before the events of Halo, and introduces a bunch of very human characters. It's live action, obviously, and they're young cadets training to fight ostensibly human insurrectionists and insurgents in the far-flung human colonies in the future. At this point in the timeline, they haven't encountered the Covenant, so the story introduces the human-Covenant conflict in a surprising way, and also introduces these characters to the Master Chief in a pretty compelling way. And we introduce the viewers to a couple of characters who are going to show up in the game, in the campaign against Spartan Ops, and so everything ties together in this really interesting way, and we get to see all these origin stories at once as kind of a primer for the whole Halo universe. Not just Halo 4, but it does have some direct ties into Halo's fiction.
And when's the game out?
Game comes out November 6th, which is Election Day in the US, and the day after Guy Fawkes Night here, so it's going to be lots of fireworks, I think, one way or another.